on YouTube because it looks like it's that time. It looks like we're live on YouTube. So, yeah, look at that, son of a gun. All right, so hello Facebook, hello YouTube. This is the first time we've ever done a live video stream off of the PPD webinar series into YouTube. So, look, like I got people in the Zoom room and in YouTube, the same people. That's great. I love that. So I'm getting lots of views. So you're making me happy already. So right now we're probably at about 20 people ish watching in the Zoom room or so, 18 people or so. But want to give everybody a welcome and a hello and a heads up and we're going to try some different things tonight. I've already kind of explained it. I'll do it one more time. So if you're watching on YouTube, good evening. I did put in the comment section down below or in the comments below the video, there is a section that you can click on. If you want to join us in the Zoom room for the webinar tonight, click on the link. There is a password down below. It's lowercase. And you can join us in the Zoom room no matter where you're at and jump in the Zoom room. If you have questions, we're going to have an open Q&A at the end of the session. So if you're new to Pixel Pro displays, by all means, we hope that tonight you'll learn just a little bit about the xLights software. We're going to do a class on the different preferences and the dialog box that's available to do settings and such for xLights. But before we begin, hopefully, boom, I've got a couple little announcements, and I suppose I got to remember this, share screen on Zoom. So here we go. So real quick, here's our announcements for this evening. We have a couple things in our PPU Facebook group. If you're watching and you aren't in the PPU Facebook group, by all means, come along, join us. It's a great time. We have a pretty good group of people. We're all relaxed. None of us are like bouncing off the walls except for me. Sometimes Rob, more me. But we like to do a little bit of fun things. Last week, I created a poll, or a couple weeks ago, I created a poll. I was thinking, man, wouldn't it be interesting to see how many people actually make their own network cables versus who buys them ready to use? So hands up in chat if you like to make your own network cables or if you prefer to buy them. I prefer to buy them, but hands up if you like to make your own. It seems that about 60% of everybody out there likes to make their own network cables. I did it for a couple times. I'm done with it, but I'm over trying to be a perfectionist with it. So I wanted to share that with everybody that's been out there for a couple weeks and we never really talked about it. However, I did start a brand new poll today. This one should be fun. What lie do you like to tell yourself, your wife, your husband, your significant other, your friends about your Pixel holiday lighting display? Feel free to add any of your own experiences to the list and vote for as many as you like. So what I liked this question because I wanted to share it with you. I wanted to share it with everybody so they could see, hey, guess what? Look, there, Ed Shoup, how many? His biggest lie is how much it actually costs. He lies about his cost. I think it's great. So, just something fun. Join us. Add your comments. Comment down below. And yeah, that's what's going on in the PPU Facebook group. So the other thing that's going on is the Guess the Sequence of the Month contest. So if you're familiar with Pixel Pro displays, we do a Guess the Sequence club. Nope. Get that out of there. If you're in the PPD Guess the Sequence or in the PPU Facebook group, we do a Guess the Sequence each and every month. There's one new song that we add to the store that is brand new, and it's usually Christmas themed. And so this month, we do a contest to see if you can guess it. We've given away one hint, so if you go to the PPU Facebook group and you guess look at the hint and guess one of the songs that you think that it's going to be. We do this for 3 days in a row. If you guess correctly, we enter you in to a prize raffle drawing, and things can be won like gift cards for different vendors across the hobby. So that's something like that we like to have a lot of fun with. Finally, if you are in the club, don't forget it is 9/27. It's the 27th of September. Go get your monthly sequence. These are your triple play choices. We also added the Ghostbusters intro and the Carol of the Bells intro, so you can pick those up if you're in the club. They're only $9, $10. And then these are the moving heads. So those are all available for you to pick up by the end of the month. If you ever miss a sequence of the month and you're in the club, just send us an email, info@pixelprodisplays.com. We'll get you set up. If you've missed them from the past, never feel like you have to miss it. New song in the store. We just released this last week. Another one coming tomorrow, but the new one in the store is Cell Dweller, Imperial March. This is done by one of the PPD sequence, a member of our PPD sequence team. They did a phenomenal job on it, and it's actually done very well. So pick that up if you're interested in having a really cool Halloween song or Christmas song. That I use this for Christmas every year. It's one of the greatest things. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with tonight's lessons. So tonight we have, I'm going to show you two different boxes here of xLights. I have a box open here where I'm going to be able to demo some things. Let me close these because that'll just kind of give me a little more real estate. And then the one on the left here I'm going to use as the preferences screen, and the one on the right is going to be for let's see, the demo of what the preferences can actually do and where they are affected and what you might see if you change them. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started. In order to understand what preferences are, I do want to give a nod to the people who did the work. Dan Culp did a lot of work to clean up what used to be the settings menu. So at across the top of the screen here, back 3-4 years ago, there was a drop-down menu that was called settings. And this menu was god-awful long. I mean, it just had settings upon settings. And it took us a while to get... it took everybody a while to figure out how the best way to reveal this to people or to organize it, because it just became a jumble of settings. So they came up with this. If you go into File and you click on Preferences, what happens is we have a Preferences dialog that pops up, and what you see here is a number of tabs that range for a significant amount of options and settings, which you can then set in xLights that are rather helpful in some instances, and maybe you didn't know about them. So I will say that I enjoy going through these because the developers do add new things a lot of times, and sometimes when we read the release notes of the next version of xLights, we don't realize that they've added something. So this is on the most recent version of xLights. It's September 27th, 2022, and we're on version 2022.17 of xLights. I think there's a new version going to be released rather soon. But in any event, these are the options as of now. Your screen may look different if this is 2, 3, 4 years in the future, and so please forgive me if things change. This is just the way things go. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first tab in our preferences is going to be your backup screen. So a lot of times you have a bunch of different settings that are helpful for your backups. And what the first checkbox is, backup on save. Now, every time you click the save button, it backs up something. And if you want to continuously back something up, it will back up on save. You can have that checkbox set. You can and what this backup on save is typically all of the sequences that are in the directory. I believe that's what it's for. It could be just for the one. Next, you have the backup on launch. So as soon as you launch xLights will typically back up every XSQ file, and it will back up your layout, and it will back up your I I believe it'll back up your network as well as your key bindings. Those are the main files that xLights cares about. It's not going to back up your music, but it is going to take care of anything xLights related. So if you have music, you want to make sure you have your own backup of that. xLights isn't going to back that up for you unless they watch the video and they say, oh, well, we can back up music too. But that might be unnecessary. You have a backup of backup subfolders, so you can have a number of folders inside your xLights directory. It could probably make a backup of those as well. And then this is, I will be honest, this is probably Robert's favorite, and Robert Van Orsdale, that is, because he calls me a file hoarder. So Rob usually sets this for 30 days or 90 days or something like that. I don't like to turn mine on because there's a lot of times that I work with something from one year to the next, and if I need to revert to something, I like to be able to pick and choose some of the things. But I do go in and clean up my own folders as time goes on. But if you realize that, hey, it's the end of the year and you saved one backup of all of your stuff, then you could purge your backups out, and xLights can do that automatically for you. But these are the settings that you can set it to. You can assign a specific backup directory. The default is to back up to your show folder. So basically what that's going to do is that's going to go right to your xLights directory. In this instance, this is the pro layout version of xLights for PPD, and it backs up right to the show folder. And if I screw something up, I can go back into the backup folder and clear it out, or reapply it or import it back in if I screwed something up. So I have an alternative backup directory. Now, the alternative isn't an automatic backup. There is no automatic backup for the alternative that I'm aware of. But if you hit File and Backup, Alternate Backup right here, F11, that will back up into my alternative directory. So that could be, maybe you do that at the end of the season, all your final sequences, you do that, and you have an alternative location where you save those. So 2 locations, and one's redundant so that if you ever lose it, you've got it. So next we'll go to the View tab here. And so what's nice about the View tab is it deals with how you see things, obviously, in xLights. So the tool icon size, it says large here. Now, why this is nice is because you can see here, I have my tool size icons up here set to large. They can go to very small or extra large. I prefer the large, and the reason I prefer the large is because I have a standard 1920 by 1080p monitor, and those are the monitors that I have on this computer and my other desktop computer. And with those settings, all of the xLights effects will be displayed completely across the screen, the largest that they can be displayed without overtaking the empty space. I find this rather useful because I do use this every once in a while. I do not use, where is it at? I think there is a, maybe there is. I thought there was. There, yeah, there it is. I don't use it very much, but this is the effects. This is the effects box, the click and drag box. I find this to be identical, absolutely identical to this across the top of the screen. So I feel like I don't really need that. So I've taken the time to just not utilize this, and I kind of leave it out of my sequencing and such. So that's what that is. Go ahead and minimize this. But you can change it to large, extra large. It will, if you change this to extra large because you need to really see them, then that size will be extremely large, but you won't be able to see all of your effects because they will overflow into the next screen. They don't wrap around and make 2 columns, and there's no way to divide this up at the moment to make this a shorter bar, or to be able to. You can move this. You can move this bar, by the way. If you've never done that, you can put it in other places. You can put it on the side, you can put it on the bottom, but I'll put it back where I had it if I can. Uh-oh. There we go. Come on. No, we'll mess with it later. I know you can put it on the bottom. Some people put it at the bottom. Oh well. We'll leave it alone. So next we've got OpenGL settings. So OpenGL is a form of graphics driving. It's not it's a way that you turn graphical data into viewable data. From my understanding, I'm not a programmer and I don't know everything about every one of the specific details, but there was a point in time when older computers needed help being set to a specific version of OpenGL in order to output displays from across older systems. If you have a more modern computer system these days, you're probably not going to have an issue or have a need to change the OpenGL settings. And the same with the render order. I want to say that the render order was useful, and by all means, if you feel like you need to comment in the comment section, do so below. The render order. This was, I believe, this had something to do with how things looked and what order that something was portrayed in, not in a sequence, but in whenever it came to the preview, the house preview, to make it look better. So again, you can always look up on xlights.org. There is a manual. I will point this out because Scott's done a ton of work on the xLights manual. So you can come in here and you can walk through some of these settings that that maybe you don't know a lot about or you want to learn more. He has done he's done a significant amount of work on that. So model handle sizes. I have mine set to extra large. You can make them normal, large, or extra large. Model handle sizes, that would deal with over here in the layout tab. If we were to zoom in and click on these little handles right here, we can unlock this. And these handle sizes can get really tiny, or they can be really large as they are on the screen there. The need for that is quite useful when you consider that some people have a hard time seeing, so having an extra large handle size is really nice. Large and then normal, you can make them smaller if you need to. The Effects Assist window. So if we go into xLights and we open up a sequence, we have what's called the Effects Assist window. And I think I done messed up like AA run, right? I shouldn't have done that. Let's see. Or we just open up another version of xLights. It's okay. xLights, there we go. That'll take a second, but I'll show you here in just a second what xLights will do with your Effects Assist window as soon as this comes up. All right, here we go. New sequence, animation done. There we go. All right, so what the Effects Assist window, and this is your icon, your shortcut icon for the Effects Assist window. If you click on it, this is your Effects Assist. There are some effects that, let me get rid of these. There are some effects in xLights that automatically will trigger the Effects Assist window to open up. And I believe one of them is Morph. This is a Morph effect. And then another one is going to be the Picture effect, which would be that right there. So those are the two effects, the two main effects that are going to activate the xLights Effects Assist window. And so it's nice if you like it to always be on, always be off, or auto toggle. So if you have auto toggle set and you save, you click OK, and you have a sequence open, when you click on, I believe it's just the Morph effect, it will pop right up and this will show up. But Scott went in and added this icon here. So I usually leave this set to always off, and I just turn it on and turn it off whenever I need it. So that's how that setting is meant to be for. If you didn't know that that was there and you put the morph effect down and it pops up and you don't need it, then there's your way to shut it off. It's just to set it to always off, and it will disappear for you whenever, and it will close or it will open if you click on the icon. Another nice thing that was added into xLights was show the play controls on the house preview. So what's nice is that if you are, let's get out of 3D. If you have xLights open and you're doing a sequence preview and you hit the play button, you can watch the sequence play back because you have the play buttons here. But also, you'll notice that there's play buttons right here on the main xLights screen. So you can either use the stop, the play, the pause, and you have the left first frame or the last frame, or you have a replay section. So those are moved down to here, except for the replay is not found on here, but you have the play buttons on the screen. Now, the other nice thing is that again, you have a tool icon that turns it on and off. So I can have it turned on or I can have it turned off. But if you didn't want to mess with finding the right icon, let's say you're working off of a laptop and you only have this one screen, you have another function or a setting in the preferences box that will auto show house preview. And what auto show house preview does is the moment that you come up here and you push play, it will pop up this house preview for you and it will start playing it. And then as soon as you stop it, it will close the house preview and it will hide it as if it wasn't even there. So that's a nice option. If you appreciate that, then you can use that, especially on a laptop. That could be quite useful and helpful because at that point, your screen real estate size is very much premium whenever you're trying to sequence on the laptop. So there is the preferences views. Next, we'll go over to the effects grid. Now, we have spacing settings here. We have a drop down for spacings. Now, I have for years used the smallest spacing possible. This is extra small. I like to get as much squeezed up on here as I can. Sometimes it's a little too small. I grab the wrong thing, maybe one line up because I don't have my mouse centered. But you can always change this from extra small to extra large, which gives you nice big wide row gaps, not gaps, but it extends your rows so they're much taller, and so you can always make a change there to fit whatever it is that you're working on. If you have a very high density monitor, let's say a 4K monitor, it might help you to make these medium or small or medium, and you can still have a lot on your screen, but also it's large enough for you to be able to click on and activate or set an effect down or do whatever it is that you're trying to do in the sequence grid. So icon backgrounds. Now this is an interesting one. If we come over here and we put down, let's say, the twinkle effect, T for twinkle, capital T. So there's the twinkle effect. This is what an effect background looks like right there. You can turn that on and off, and in essence it would look like this, where you have a solid line that goes from the start to the end, but it also shows the icon in the center. That's the standard xLights effect look. You also have this different effect here, like morph. Morph has a head to it. The galaxy's like this, and there's I believe there's another one that acts like that as well. So this is the background. That's what that's for. If you are curious that in what the icon background does. You have node values. So this is interesting, and I really liked learning what node values was, because it was something I didn't know this was added into xLights. And what node values does is, if you have an effect on a, let's say here's an all house prop, and we double click and we open it up, and let's go to the roof here, and we'll click on a model, like say the icicles, and then we click on the strand, and we're really going down to the individual node level. So and let's turn this up a little bit. Where's my effects settings? Let's bump that up a lot. So there, you see how we have these color shaded areas here? Those are where the twinkles are being applied to the individual nodes. What node values does is it turns this off. It turns it off from you being able to see what's at the node level. And the reason it does this is meant to help your render times, because xLights has to render that across your screen. So in order to render it, it must be there. So you can show the node values, or you cannot show the node values. So that was something I learned today that I was not aware of in the past, and hopefully it's something that'll be helpful for you. So the next thing is snap to timing marks. So if we had, let's say we had a sequence that had, let's say a bunch of timings, you could basically set down an effect here in the center, and if snap to timings was set, all you'd have to do is get close to the timing mark, let go, and it would automatically snap to timings. It was something that was asked for a very long time ago by Steve Jerome, and I think that was back like 2016-ish, 2016 and a half, 2017. And they finally added it. I think Gil added it probably 2 years ago, or three, maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago by now. But it's a nice functionality. Usually I'm zoomed in so far that I don't need to worry about the snap to, but it is a nice addition. If you need that snap to, you can just click on that. So what is double click mode? So we have a timing mark here on the screen here, and to display what double click mode is, you can double click a timing area, and what xLights will either natively do is it will play it for you just like it's done there. So if we put like the pinwheel effect on here, let's make it a little thicker so you can see it. And so there's your pinwheel effect, right? If you double click it, it plays it for you from the start of the timing mark to the end of the timing mark. That's your double click. This is play timing. But if we were to change it, and I'm not changing it on this screen, I'm going to do it manually. We change it to edit text. If we were doing a lyric track and you double clicked on here, what it would do is it would open up this enter label box, and then you could go in here and you could enter your text that you are creating for your singing phases or lyric tracks, and you would be able to then further break those down, or you could use those as song references throughout the song, like this part is the chorus, or this part is these are happy beats or upbeats. I don't know. You could put hello there for whatever reason. So the double click mode changes whether when you double click it does it play, or when you double click it does it open up the enter new label field. So I have mine set to automatically play the timing because that's what I like to do with it. But if you do a lot of timing mark edits where you're adding those words in, you can change this to double click and it will open up this text box just like this. If you don't want to change this, if you have this set to edit text, you'd have to hold the shift key and double click, and then it will play. But then if you don't, and you don't hold the shift key, the double click would open up the edit text box. So the shift key is your way around. So shift does two things for you. It does the opposite of what this says. So in double click mode, if you have edit text, it will double click and edit text. If you have edit text and you hold the shift key, it will do the play timing, and vice versa. So hope I made a good understanding from that for you guys. Let's see here. We have the small waveform. This is kind of helpful if you're trying to squeeze as much as possible onto your sequencing screen. One of the things that you can do is you can make the waveform a little smaller. I don't like the smaller waveform because a lot of times I am zooming in and I'm really trying to get a hold on exactly what timing I'm looking for. So I like to have that a little bit larger and easier to see, especially whenever I'm like, let's say, zoomed out really far. So I like the larger timing, waveform timing, but you may prefer the smaller one. And all it does is it scrunches it up and makes it gives you a little bit more room. Maybe like for me, 2 or 3 more rows of models down below. Next, you have the last thing you have here is display transition marks. So previous to this edition of xLights that we have now, you didn't know whether you had a transition on your effect or not unless you went over to the layer blendings box, which is here, and you clicked on the in transition. you clicked on the in transition. I don't know if you can see it over here. Let me move this, because if you're on YouTube, you might not see it. So over here, this is your layer setting box. If we come down here and scroll down, you might see that you have the in transition and out transition. As soon as you click and select, you can manually type in, or you can select a predetermined. You can see here that this is displayed as an in transition, and then the out transition is displayed as an out transition as red. So green is in, red is out, and if your transitions overlap by any stretch, then it changes it to yellow, and that tells you visually that there is some transition issues, that something's overlapping. You may want it that way, or you may not want it that way. So something that you may not have known about that is inside xLights is the display transition marks. So next we have on the tabs, we have the sequences tab, and there's a lot in here, and it's rather easy. Render on save is a nice function for folks who do a lot of sequencing at the end of the season. xLights will yell at you. It will warn you every single time that you close out of your preferences screen. And I'll give you an example of that. If you do not have render on save, I'm sorry, excuse me, this is a different one, Fseq version. If you don't have an Fseq set to create in your sequence, like I don't need any Fseqs until it's go time. So xLights will yell at you whenever you're trying to close it. I got those two confused. So let me go back, and we'll open that back up, and I'll start back over again. Preferences and sequences. So render on save, whenever you hit the save button, xLights will automatically render. Whoops, don't want to open that up. But whenever you hit save, xLights will automatically render the sequence and then save it at the same time. You have an option for a low definition render. So what xLights can do is it can do a low definition render, so your render time might not be as long. If you're only looking at the preview in the window and you're just trying to make sure an effect looks okay, maybe you just need a low definition render, and you can put it in low definition render mode. If you have a very large display, this might help you speed up your render times. Another functionality is default model blending for new sequences. So what does this mean? So if we close out of this sequence, we'll discard the changes, and let's say we create a new sequence. We have this little wizard that pops up here. What model blending is the setting at which models blend effects between the master list of props and the order that they're displayed in the layout. So I have a number of videos on YouTube and in the PPD website that you can check out that talk about model blending. This is enabled. I have it enabled model blending. But where this comes from is on this sequence settings screen. You have this allow blending between models. And what that means is if you have a model at the top of your hierarchy here, it's actually at the bottom, xLights effects will render from the bottom up in this list. And if you put something down here, it may block this if you have it may block that if you have that model blending turned off or unchecked or disabled. In this case, it would say disabled. I have it automatically set to default to allow for blending, so that any effect that's on down here will blend with the effects. Even if there's an effect up here, it'll blend together, and it should, give it a different kind of an output looking thing. So this is what model default model blending mode is for, and how it helps in your sequencing. Default view for new sequences. So we just talked about a moment ago the view, and I said earlier the master view. You can create a number of different views. This is your display elements, and I opened it using the display element icon. And what you can do is you can set a master view that xLights will automatically open to. So hats off to Scott for doing this, because this was ridiculously helpful. If you take the time to set up a view that you want to create and use as a master view that will order the props in a specific order, so that whenever they are in a specific order, that they always render a certain way. This is helpful if especially for people like me who do create sequences that are shared and sold and used by numbers of viewers across the country, and it creates a little bit of consistency. There's no rule to say that you have to use this, but we use it because we know that the end user is going to appreciate some consistency between our sequences. You can order your effects in any sequence individually, however you like, with your own individual views, and you can make them the master view just by selecting one and setting it up and then clicking the make master button. But in this instance, I've spent a lot of time with our new master, and I've set it up like that way. So now whenever I create a brand new sequence, every time it opens, it automatically opens to this one view. That was a huge thanks to Scott. Oh, and it makes it the master. It automatically makes. Now, if you want to erase that, or not erase it, but if you want to set it back to default, just select this neutral box here, this empty box, and that will take it back to the xLights master, what xLights would consider the master. Render cache. Render cache was added in an attempt to help expedite the rendering process for extra large layouts that have lots of pixels, and this has been very helpful, but also in some cases not helpful. It all depends on the amount of space you have. What render caching will do is if you enable render caching, xLights will render cache. It will create a cache full of all of the effects pre-rendered in a folder inside your xLights directory. Now, this is very helpful if you do a little bit of sequencing on your home, but if you do a lot of work, it does take up space because it physically saves that render inside a cache file inside your xLights show directory, and whenever it creates it, it saves it there, and it can become a rather large file, but it's there so that when you open the sequence, you can just hit play, you can watch your sequence play, but but that's what the render cache was meant for. I leave mine set to locked effects only. You could also set it to disable, but I have it for locked effects only. Sometimes I want to the biggest effects that I work with are the matrix and the megatree, and so once I finish the tree and the matrix, I lock those effects so they render quicker whenever I'm sequencing the rest of the house. So that's sometimes I find that very helpful. Render cache directories. So this is where you can use your show folder, or you can give a specific folder on your computer that you'd like to save all of those render caching files, and therefore maybe you don't overload, maybe let's say your Dropbox, or maybe it's on onboard storage or something like that. Next is your autosave intervals. You have a ton of intervals that you can choose from: 30 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes. So basically, it's quite helpful if you do a lot of sequencing, especially on a number of projects. It's very nice to have this auto save, because sometimes you get up in the middle of sequencing, you're taking a break, and you come back and you just keep going, and then you crash. And xLights crashes on you, and you're like, oh no, did I save it? Well, the auto save is there to help save it for you in case you something happened in the last few minutes, and it does an auto backup or an auto save for you. That rather, you have a bunch of also here in this box you have media resource directories. These are a number of directories that you could possibly have that that xLights can kind of track and say, oh, you use that directory. Oh, you use that directory. So those are something that's in there. You can add media resource directories as well. I haven't really used this. The Fseq version. So back in the day, when xLights was young, they had a version of FPP that was older, and some people remember this as version 1, or I remember it as version 1.8 FPP, which was the bane of my existence until I kind of understood and started figuring it out. But the support for version 1 xLights is still there, but version 1 also is useful for when you're rendering a sequence and you're playing it on a Falcon F16 V3 in standalone. Now, there's not a lot of data or information on how to make a Falcon V3 be a standalone controller. It does a decent job, but if you have to render out your sequences that you're playing on that player, as V1, and that's what it's used for. It was also used as a gateway to keep up with any version of FPP that was previous to version 2.0. At least I believe it was. So you correct me if I'm wrong. But there are a number of other versions of Fseq. You're welcome to learn about those on your own. I only deal with the default. I know that some of these might have something to do with other show players or sequencer. Excuse me, other. Those little controller, different controllers that have SD cards on them that need a specific Fseq version. In my experience, I've only really needed to use version 1 and version 2, the default that you see here. So I kind of alluded to this before. xLights automatically sets you up to create an Fseq file. If you do a lot of sequencing and you're sequencing from January to October and you're not running your shows until, let's say, November, in my opinion, there's no need to ever have an Fseq file. However, xLights will warn you every time you close out of the preferences that your Fseq file is not created. So there's two options here, there's this option here to create an Fseq. You every time you hit the save button, Fseq is created. I have mine disabled because I render sequences constantly, and if you hit the render button, it typically prepares the sequence for viewing, and then when you hit the save button, it creates the Fseq file. Those Fseq files in some instances can be very, very big, so in my opinion, I don't need them. But the reason that developers are very adamant about having this setting turned on is that you, as the end user who's using this from the span of, let's say, October, November, December, and you don't use the software all the time, this option here is there for you so that it reminds you that, hey, you need to turn the Fseq on, or you have to have that on in order to create your sequence to run that either on FPP or with Xschedule. So the Fseq directory, you can, I use the show folder. You can designate a specific place for xLights to store your Fseqs, so that's always an option. Moving on to the output tab, and some of these are really not as entailed, but that's okay because the more that they add to the preferences, the better off we all are. Here's an option that I wasn't aware of. I read a little bit about it inside the manual, the online manual, again, thanks to Scott. And this is using FrameSync. And this is typically used, from what I understand, with ArtNet. Now, I've never had to use this before, but it is something that you might need to use when you're using ArtNet. It may be something that you may never use. But I know with E131, I've never had to use the FrameSync. But with ArtNet, you may have to use that for whatever you're sending out data. One that we do use quite a lot is forcing a local IP address. Sometimes we have multiple adapters, network adapters on our computers, and it's helpful if xLights knows exactly which adapter you're going to be communicating out of. So let's say you're connected wirelessly to the internet using your wireless adapter. And let's say your hard network connection is connected to your show. This is how you could define to xLights which network you specifically want to use, and then obviously you'd have to have your network property set up for that as well. So this is nice. This kind of tells xLights, hey, by all means, follow this. Duplicate frames to suppress. I usually sequence at 20 frames per second. You can go up to far more now, but typically this is helpful with xLights whenever you're sending out data to turn on to suppress duplicate frames, and doing so is helpful because it kind of mitigates some of the extra data that might happen to be put out with xLights, and it could speed up your network communications a little bit because less unuseful data is being sent out. So if you have issues with stuttering, this is one of the things that we usually go to. We'll usually force the local IP, and we'll suppress duplicate frames, and we'll choose the frame rate that we're sending data out at. And then we have Xschedule and Xfade. Now, I've done an entire webinar on xSchedule and on xSpade both. You can find those on the PPD website. xSchedule and xSpade is a way to control xLights live. It is very useful, but it's very basic. It may not be for everybody. But in this instance, I have it disabled. You could always enable this to use the xSchedule and xFade. You can use both of these to if you happen to be doing something, let's say with Jukebox, and you're doing some sort of live performance. Excuse me there. Next, we have a brand new tab that has been recently added. If you've ever done a check sequence, which is Tools Check Sequence, you may find that some of your here you have tests and then you have Tools Check Sequence. If you've ever done a check sequence and there's been a number of kind of oddball errors, why does this happen? Why does that happen? You know, sometimes there's different errors that show up and they just kind of fill up the page. And to go back and to fix some of these, it's not necessary to fix them all, but xLights is just letting you know, hey, this isn't really going to hurt your sequence, or it possibly could. It all depends. Is this really how you wanted it? And if you are the sequencer and you created the layout and you know, nope, this is exactly the way I want it, you can disable some of these superfluous or overdone check sequence errors that show up that might not be as meaningful as what you might think they are. So some of those are, and I haven't really gone through and done any of these to mine, but you can disable checks on duplicate uses of universe IDs across the controllers. So basically what that means is you can have controllers set up over here all with universe 1 through 20. You can have 30 or 50 or 100 controllers with universe 1 through 20. As long as they have different IP addresses, they're not going to be hurt in any way whatsoever. So xLights will flag you for that. xLights will flag you if you disable for non-contiguous channels on controller ports. You can disable that. Another functionality is disable checks for groups containing models from different previews. So if let's say you have a couple different previews here, maybe you have preview 2, preview 3, preview 4, there's possibilities that you have groups in all of those that are the same, and it's causing an error between those previews. So that's there to kind of get rid of that error that shows up, which there's nothing you can do about it, but it's just letting you know that it's an error that can avoid it from showing up on check sequence. Disable checks for duplicate nodes in model groups. One of those would be, let's say, for example, the PPD wreath petals. This one, there's this submodel here has a submodel that overlaps with this submodel here and this submodel here. See these pixels overlap between these two models, and that would help eliminate those all of the overlapping submodels. That kind of helps with that error that you would see on your check sequence. You have disabled transition times checking. Some sequencers, and in the past, before we had, like I showed you before, whenever you had the in transitions and out transitions, you didn't see this transition here physically, about 4 years ago or 3 years ago. And now that you do see the transition, you can see red and green put together equals yellow, and that tells you whenever something's too long or too short, or too long basically, and they're overlapping. If you have a lot of those in your older sequences like I do, this will disable the transition error that might show up in sequences. And then finally, disable custom model size checking. So where this is really helpful is, let's say you have a very, very large model. Now, I've cleaned mine all up, but for the most part, if a model is over 200 by 200 in the grid size of a custom model, we'll say, then what xLights will do is it will yell at you. It'll say in your check sequence, FYI, you have a model that is larger than 200 by 200, and why it's yelling at you is because it hurts your render time whenever you have all of these empty spaces that are here. Even though if you zoom out, see, this is a really, really pretty model. Like this is like a spot-on, beautiful model, and that's because there's all of these spaces for you to find exactly the right place to put this pixel count number. But the problem is that in order to make it look this nice, you have all of this open space, and that creates extra bytes that xLights has to render anyway. And so the smaller a model looks, or the smaller that a model is, the faster that it renders. It also renders differently because of the size of the grid, so some effects will scale differently. So that's just something to think about. You can disable the error. Some people put crazy big models in. They're 1,000 by 1,000 squares, and that's, you know, tens of thousands of bytes that are zeros that have to be rendered, and so that hurts your render time, and that's what's helpful. This disables the check for it to say, hey, look, I know I'm always going to have this error. Don't keep reminding them of it. So huge thanks to, I believe Keith added that within the past few releases. So random effects, really easy, really quickly. Random effects can be generated on your sequence anytime you like. You just have to select and hit the capital Shift R on your keyboard, and it will create all of these random effects for you. Well, what's nice is that there are a number of xLights effects that do nothing graphical. They have no bearing on this on a regular sequence whatsoever, and some of those might be the DMX effect. Some of them might be the servo. It might be the faces effect. You know, and so this is where you go to either select them or not select them. So in this case, like, I don't want the on effect to show up as a random effect. I don't want the off effect to show up as a random effect. That it doesn't, you know. And then picture effect. If you put the picture effect down here, I'll go put the picture effect down. You'll see you have a big red spot here because there's nothing for the picture effect to activate. So there's a number of reasons why some of these might not be necessary. Gladiator, it's a I don't want to call it an unuseful. Some people still have the need for Gladiator, but it's an effect that that the average person doesn't use anymore, because a lot of the effects that were found in Gladiator have been ported into xLights and their native xLights effects now. So these are helpful if you are using the random effects function in xLights, where capital or Shift R, capital R, and you can create random effects and you know, mess around with them and such. So that turns them on or turns them off and makes it available to be randomized. Another easy one is the color preferences tab, and so I have created for myself a color preferences, and this is a huge thank you to Gil. He wrote this a long time ago. I think Scott enhanced this a little bit too. I'm not sure though. Possibly he could have. But a lot of these, the grid you see here now, I'm in Windows. I don't have a dark mode. What is it? Mac has a dark mode. I kind of went through and I found a way to make my own dark mode, and I exported it and I created it. It's actually on the PPD website if you ever wanted to use dark mode, like the darkest version of dark mode. Maybe or the lightest version of dark mode, I guess. But you could go download this. It's on the website. But there might even be a Windows dark mode now. I don't know. But I found it very helpful because I was able to change the color of these timing marks. And you can see here, this is this aqua color. Then you can have another timing mark, add timing mark. Let's go with a metronome, and let's just do that. And so the second color is green, so you can see there's the turquoise, the green. The next would be yellow, orange, and pink. In the past, these were colors that didn't work really well for me to be able to see easily, and so Gil added this in, and it was a huge, nice, helpful thing, because you could definitely see neon green versus a dark green or a dark blue or the red. Those were much harder for my eyes to see them, so I put neon colors there so I could see those easy, and then I was able to adjust these to make a little bit of a dark mode over here. Finally, the last tab that we have tonight for you in the Preferences box, or the Preferences dialog, is kind of the catch-all that doesn't make much sense without making it its own tab, kind of the miscellaneous, if you will. The address to which you have set up this xLights version, the email address. So if what this is helpful for is if you happen to have a bug report and you send it in, there'll be an email address attached to it, and the developers, if you send that in, they will be able to check out and look at your package sequence or the bug report that's included with it. But then they'll also be able to email you back because you've set your email address up in there. You have a hardware video decoding. This checkbox allows you to render video, hopefully faster, by utilizing the power that is found in your graphics card. So this is the one thing in xLights that might help you render faster with using the power of your graphics card. If you have a decent graphics card, well, it still would help possibly. I really haven't tried to use it, but it is there. I probably should give it a try. Shaders on background threads. So if your computer has a lot of cores and a lot of threads, newer systems in the past 5 to 7 years, we were used to, for many years, 4 cores and 4 threads of CPU power in the late teens, before the 20s, and in 2017, 2018. They started competing. Different AMD and Intel started competing against each other really good, and so now we have a lot of high threaded and or higher threaded and higher core count CPUs, which help us when we're rendering sequences. Now, cores don't matter very much. It's the power at which the CPU core can calculate the material that it has to calculate it in. So that has somewhat to do with I believe cache speed and stuff like that. Also, how much RAM that you have available and such. But shaders on background threads, if your computer has extra threads that are just sitting there, xLights will utilize them. I'm running a Ryzen 5950X right now. It has 16 cores, 32 threads. That's a lot of threads. So I could turn that on and probably see a little bit of help with the background threads using rendering on the shaders. Some other things that if you happen to do a lot of package sequences, you can exclude your preset effects library. You can also exclude your audio MP3 file. We do that obviously because there's a lot of presets that I've developed over the years, but there's also audio. You're not really allowed to share audio. Audio is something that you have to purchase for your own use, and so it's probably not a good idea to ever include audio, especially if it's a track that was created by an author that you hear on the radio, because those people are signed and they have rights to their music. So you giving away the audio is probably not a good idea. It breaks copyright law, so that's something that we are very aware of, and we try not to fall into the habit of ever including audio with things, unless it is an unsigned or we have the authorization from the author to do so. Video export settings. We have video codec. Now, a few months, maybe last year, I started noticing that, beginning of this year, I began to notice that xLights was having issues exporting the house preview videos for our sequences, and it got a little blurry. I ended up having to blow up the screen really big and then rendering at a different rate or a different viewable size, and then re-rendering the sequence in video editing software. But it turns out that some video export codecs were added, and I found that what worked for me was setting my video codec to MPEG-4, and I had to go in and render a number of times to get the bit rate just to the right, the right number, and it came out to 72,000. So this renders a pretty high definition 1920 by 1080. I have to set the screen size for that, but in any event, having it at this bit rate, it seems to produce a very good looking export preview video of any of the sequences that I've done. So in here we have a link save. What this is linking the save button on the controller and layout tab, or none. So So over the past few years, we've seen the rise of having a controller tab as opposed to a network tab, and the controllers. Anytime you use the visualizer for a controller, anytime you made a change, whenever you clicked and dragged something from one side to the other, and you closed the visualizer, you'd have to click Save here, and then you'd have to go back to the Layout tab and hit click Save. This preference here is what saves you the time of having to toggle between those two tabs in the layout and the controllers. So I have that set to controller and layout tab are linked as one save button. You have link controller upload. So what this does is, and I haven't done this yet, but you can set this to input and outputs. And if you are using xLights and you have your controllers all here, you can select one controller and you can click the upload inputs and you click the upload input, but it would also upload the inputs. Then after that was successful, it would upload the outputs as well. So that's what that link button would be for. And that's rather helpful because if you're going to do one, you're probably going to do the other. And now another thing that they added was prompt issues during batch render. So there are at times, let's say you have a newer version of a sequence. Remember how we talked about backups earlier? xLights will do an autosave, and if that autosave, let's say xLights shuts down and there's a newer version of the sequences of the autosave, it would prompt you during your batch render to utilize the backup saved version. Do you want to open that one instead? There are other reasons why there might be prompts during a batch render whenever you're rendering all your sequences for your show. Perhaps there's a picture missing from one of the picture effects. xLights can't find it. That would be a prompt, and you could bypass those prompts or you can ask it to prompt. So that's what that is for. You have a Purge download cache at startup. So if you were using, as we talked about earlier, download caching, I don't know why that wouldn't be on that other page, but that's okay. You could the Purge download cache at startup. So whenever you open up xLights, if you check this would delete all of the cached effects in xLights for what you've done, and then that way it would clear it out and you'd only render and look at the things that you need to look at. And then the next thing that was just recently added, tip of the day, you have a minimum tip level. So I have it turned off because I've seen a number of them already, and they're great, but I just don't need to see them. So you can always turn off the tips of the day, or you can have the beginner versions, you can have the intermediate, the advanced, and the expert tips of the day. These are kind of wonderful if you're new to xLights. You can also recycle some of the tips. Now, the very last thing that is on this preferences screen, I am the most proud about, because I am proud because at Pixel Pro Displays we have done a significant amount of work to make it as easy as possible for the people who utilize Pixel Pro Display sequences. And this isn't an ad. This is more of a nod or a mention to the fact that we spent a significant amount of time with a fellow in the community who did a lot of work with us, and we helped create these what we call certified models. So on the certified model page, we took the time to download free models that the xLights developers had placed here for all of us to use, because a number of our clients and users had said, hey, the model downloads, the submodels don't work exactly the right way. What do I map with something? And so what we did was we took the time and found a significant number of the models that we found could use some updates to them. And we created our own list of what we call certified models. So if you want to have a model that has already been created to fit with the PPD layouts with our group settings, with our submodel setups, we have them set up for Boscoyo Studios. We have some set up for Gilbert Engineering. Some of them are from EFL as well. and you can go in and you can search them. And if you don't see one that you like, you can send us your name, address, email address, and a link to the prop that you would appreciate being done, and we can see about getting it added to the website and post it up. So this is now, why am I telling you about certified models? Well, xLights decided that if you did download one of our certified models, xLights developers decided that no, we don't want you to use their certified models because we don't want you to use them. But what I will say is that other xLights developers said, well, I don't want you to ignore them. If the client wants to use them, or the person in the community wants to use these certified models, then by all means. So I always leave this box checked to ignore any vendor recommended models. So what xLights will do is it will recommend, hey, there's a regular vendor model in here for this, and it will prompt you to use that model instead because it says that they aren't the actual vendor models. Well, in fact, some of them are, most all of them are vendor models. The difference is that we've taken the time to add submodels. We've taken the time to add those individual groups to all of those models, so that when you import that model into your layout, it makes it easier for you to map a PPD sequence. That's all that's for, and that's why I'm most proud of this one, because we found a way to get into xLights on the back end, and you can ignore any vendor model recommendations that xLights might have, because that is an option in xLights now through the Preferences tab. So that is the entire Preferences tab. I've never gone through it from start to finish. That is an incredible amount of work that has been added in. And I have to say, it's probably pretty heavily tilted toward the first 3 years. But I've seen a lot of stuff over the past, I want to say, 1.5 to 2 years that's been added in that's been very helpful. The video exporting, it was real confusing at first, but once I figured it out, it was nice to work with that and such. So everybody out there in YouTube land, I'm going to invite you, if you're still watching, which there are a handful of you out there, go ahead and go down below into the information, the video information, more information, and click the join the Zoom room right now. We're going to open this up to an open Q&A. You know what? Probably better if I go ahead and change the scene. There we go. Go ahead and join us in the Zoom room here. pixelprodisplays.com/webinar, and then join the Zoom room link. The password is PPD lowercase, and jump in and ask your questions. We're going to do an open Q&A session on this and anything else that anybody else has are curious about. I don't see any questions in that specific chat from YouTube. I don't believe I see anything over on the Facebook chat, so a lot of people in the rooms now. If you'd like to join us, you're welcome to join us. Huge thank you to everybody who watched live on YouTube. This was our inaugural video for going live on YouTube. Yes, these can get long, but there's quite a bit of information in all of our PPD webinars, so you're welcome to join us. We do this every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we do this, and every week we do at least an open mic night where you can come in and ask your questions on Tuesday nights, 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday night. So hopefully you'll join us from here on out. Guys, that's it from me here at the PPD YouTube studio. I'm going to end the video here. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't done yet so, hit the big red subscribe button down below. And I promise you, when you hit the bell for notifications, more stuff is going to come. It'll be a little bit more fun, maybe some music, maybe something cool we're putting in this store. And if you appreciate the work and the things that we do here in the PPD YouTube channel, by all means consider joining the PPD Sequence Club and showing your support for what we do here. You get one awesome sequence each month, you get preset effects each month, and you get awesome vendor deals every single month. So huge thank you to everybody out there in YouTube land. We will catch you in the next video. So take care, and we'll see you soon. Jump in the Zoom room. We're always here. Take care. All right, so if we're on Facebook, I don't know if Rob's still running on Facebook. Looks like he is.